I stood in my kitchen, fingers trembling around the edges of a pink lunchbox my daughter-in-law accidentally delivered to my doorstep, and when I opened it, the photographs inside showed my son in bed with my best friend of 40 years. The images scattered across my counter like poison spreading through water. Daniel's face, Sarah's body, my guest bedroom, the one with the yellow quilt I'd sewn by hand, the same room where Sarah stayed during her divorce 10 years ago when I held her while she cried about loneliness and betrayal. My phone buzzed. Rebecca's name flashed across the screen. "Oh God, Margaret, I'm so sorry." Her voice crackled through the speaker, tight with something that wasn't quite panic. "That wasn't meant for you. Just forget what you saw. For everyone's sake." I couldn't speak. My throat closed like someone had wrapped hands around it and squeezed. The phone slipped from my grip and clattered against the tile floor Thomas installed 23 years ago, back when we still believed our family would grow old in this house together, surrounded by grandchildren and Sunday dinners and love. I stared at those photographs until the faces blurred into shapes I no longer recognized. My hands moved on their own, spreading the pictures across the granite countertop. Daniel helped me choose 3 years ago. He said it would increase the home's value. Now I understood he'd been cataloging assets even then. Thank you for being here with me right now. I need you to stay until the very end of this tale, because what happens next will shatter everything you think you know about family. Hit that like button if you're listening. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And please tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I want to know how far my voice can travel. How many of you understand what betrayal like this feels like? My name is Margaret Eleanor Thornton. I'm 72 years old, and until 3 hours ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. A widow who'd rebuilt her life after Thomas collapsed on a construction site 15 years back, leaving me with a 12-year-old son and a mortgage I had no idea how to pay. A mother who worked double shifts at County General, whose feet ached so badly some nights I couldn't walk from my car to the front door, but I kept working because Daniel needed college, then medical school, then a start in his practice. A grandmother who babysat every weekend, who knew which grandchild liked grape juice and which one preferred apple, who kept their favorite cookies in the jar shaped like a bear. A woman who sacrificed everything to hold her family together, who believed that love and dedication would be enough, who thought the people closest to her would protect the heart she'd given them so freely. But standing in that kitchen, photographs scattered across the counter like evidence at a crime scene, I realized I'd been living inside a beautiful lie. And the people I loved most had been the architects of my own destruction. I picked up one photograph with shaking hands, studied Daniel's face. His eyes were closed, his expression peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not when he looked at Rebecca, not when he held his children, not when he sat across from me at Sunday dinner, checking his phone every few minutes, eager to escape. But with Sarah, with my best friend of 40 years, with the woman who'd been at my wedding, who held my hand at Thomas's funeral, who knew every secret I'd ever kept. With her, my son looked happy. The realization hit like a fist to the sternum. They hadn't just betrayed me yesterday or last month. They'd been erasing me for years, one small cruelty at a time, and I was too grateful for their presence to see it. "How long have you all been laughing at me?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked. My house, the one I'd nearly lost after Thomas died, the one I'd fought to keep so Daniel would have stability, so he'd have something solid beneath his feet while the world crumbled around us, this house I'd bled for, said nothing back. I thought about the last 2 years, Daniel's growing distance, the canceled dinners, his irritation when I called too often, asked too many questions, wanted too much of his time. Rebecca's frozen smiles, her sudden interest in my finances, my estate planning, my future arrangements, her gentle suggestions that I should think about downsizing, about making things easier on everyone when I got older, when I couldn't manage alone anymore. Sarah's constant presence, her offers to keep me company on the nights Daniel worked late, her questions about his schedule, his struggles, his marriage problems. I thought she was being a good friend, helping me understand my son's distance. I thought she cared. The photographs told a different story. They showed a conspiracy, a calculated, deliberate destruction of everything I'd built. And I'd served them dinner while they plotted against me. My legs gave out. I slid down the cabinet until I sat on the cold tile floor, photographs clutched in my fist, and for the first time since Thomas died, I understood what it meant to be truly alone. Not just without a husband, not just empty nest syndrome or the natural distance that grows between parents and adult children. I was alone because the people I'd sacrificed everything for saw me as an obstacle, a resource to manage, a problem to solve. I was alone because I'd built my entire identity around loving people who were waiting for me to die so they could fight over what remained. The thought should have broken me, should have sent me spiraling into grief so deep I'd never climb out. Instead, something else stirred in my chest, something cold and sharp and unfamiliar. I stood up, smoothed my dress, placed the photographs back in the lunchbox with careful, deliberate movements. Then I walked to my bedroom, pulled out the lockbox where I kept important documents, and began making phone calls. If they wanted to treat me like I was already gone, I'd show them what a ghost could do. 20 years ago, I was someone completely different. I was Margaret Calloway then, married to Thomas Thornton, a construction foreman with rough hands and a gentle heart. We met when I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, determined to save the world one patient at a time. Thomas built houses. I healed bodies. We thought we were invincible. Daniel arrived 2 years after our wedding, a squalling, red-faced miracle who didn't sleep through the night until he was 18 months old. I'd pace the hallway with him, singing off-key lullabies, while Thomas snored softly in our bedroom, exhausted from 12-hour days, framing houses in the summer heat. We were happy. Not perfect. Thomas drank beer on weekends and left his tools scattered across the garage. I worked too many shifts and forgot to pay bills on time, but happy in the way young families are, when the future stretches out bright and uncomplicated before you. Then Daniel turned 12, and Thomas collapsed on a job site. Massive heart attack, dead before the ambulance arrived, 43 years old. The grief nearly destroyed me. I'd seen death as a nurse, held patients' hands while they slipped away, comforted families in their worst moments, but nothing prepared me for the silence that filled my house after Thomas's funeral. Nothing prepared me for raising a 12-year-old boy alone. I threw myself into work, double shifts, overtime, holiday pay. I became the nurse everyone requested because I was competent, reliable, never emotional. I'd learned to seal my grief into a box I could only open alone, in the shower where no one could hear me cry. Daniel grew up watching me sacrifice. He saw me work until my feet swelled and my back ached. He saw me turn down dates, turn down promotions that would require more education, turn down anything that might take time or money away from him. I put him through college, then medical school. I refinanced the house twice to pay tuition. I worked until I was 63, 4 years past when I'd planned to retire, because he needed support during his residency. I was so proud when he became a doctor. So proud I could barely breathe at his white coat ceremony, watching him take his oath, knowing Thomas would have burst with joy. That was 8 years ago. The last time I remember Daniel looking at me with genuine warmth instead of obligation. Sarah came into my life when our sons were in kindergarten together. Her boy Marcus was in Daniel's class. We met at a school fundraiser, both of us harried single mothers, her recently divorced, me recently widowed, trying to manage bake sale duties while keeping energetic 5-year-olds from destroying the gymnasium. We bonded over exhaustion and cheap wine in my kitchen after the kids went to bed. For 35 years, Sarah was my person, the one I called when Daniel got accepted to medical school, the one who held me when I had a cancer scare at 57, the one who knew about my fear of aging alone, about the shame I felt watching other women my age travel with their husbands while I counted pennies and worked overtime. She was there when Daniel met Rebecca. We planned the wedding together, splitting costs because Daniel and Rebecca wanted something bigger than they could afford alone. I loved Rebecca immediately. She was smart, ambitious, studying for her MBA while working full-time. She called me Mom within months of dating Daniel. She asked my advice about careers, about handling his moods, about their future plans. When they bought their first house 8 years ago, I gave them the down payment, $40,000 from Thomas's life insurance, money I'd been saving for my own retirement. But they needed it more. They were starting their lives. I could wait. When the grandchildren arrived, Emma, then Luke, 2 years later, I became the reliable babysitter. Every weekend, without fail, I kept a drawer full of their clothes at my house, their favorite snacks in my pantry, their drawings covering my refrigerator. I thought I was building something, a family legacy, the kind of tight-knit unit that gathered for holidays and helped each other through hard times. I thought sacrifice meant love, But somewhere in those years, things shifted. Daniel started arriving late for Sunday dinners, his phone constantly buzzing. Rebecca's smiles became practiced, her hugs less warm. Questions about my day became perfunctory, answered with distracted nods. Sarah started asking pointed questions. When was I planning to update my will? Had I thought about estate planning? What would happen to the house if something happened to me? I'd answer honestly because she was my best friend, because I trusted her with everything. I told her Daniel was listed as my beneficiary, that the house would go to him, that I'd set aside money for the grandchildren's education, that I wanted to make sure my family was protected. She'd nod thoughtfully and pour more wine and tell me I was such a good mother. I never wondered why she cared so much about my finances. I never questioned why she started visiting more often when Daniel's marriage seemed strained. I never noticed how she'd touch his arm when she thought I wasn't looking, how she'd laugh too loud at his jokes, how she'd volunteer to help with projects at his house on weekends when Rebecca was busy. I was too busy feeling grateful that my best friend cared about my son, that she was helping hold my fractured family together. Standing in my kitchen now, photographs burning holes in my memory, I understood the truth. They didn't just betray me yesterday or last month. They'd been erasing me for years, one conversation at a time, one secret at a time, one lie I was too grateful to question. And I was too desperate for family, too afraid of being alone, too conditioned to sacrifice myself for others, to see what was happening right in front of me. I sat at my kitchen table and forced myself to remember, to really look at the past 2 years instead of skating over the uncomfortable parts like I'd been doing. 18 months ago, Sunday dinner at my house. Pot roast, Daniel's favorite since childhood. Sarah joined us because her son Marcus was visiting his ex-wife's family for the holidays. Sarah complimented Daniel's cologne. Something expensive, sophisticated. "You smell wonderful," she said, leaning close. "Rebecca, you have good taste." Rebecca's face went tight. Her fork clinked against her plate. "I didn't buy that cologne." Awkward silence. Daniel cleared his throat. "Hospital gift exchange, you know how those go." But Rebecca's eyes stayed cold for the rest of dinner, and she barely spoke on the drive home with the kids. I'd thought it was marriage stress. Young couples go through phases. Now I knew Rebecca already suspected, already knew something was wrong. 6 months ago, my 70th birthday celebration at a restaurant downtown, Daniel arrived 30 minutes late, distracted, his phone buzzing constantly on the table beside his plate. I'd tried to ignore it, tried to focus on Emma and Luke chattering about school, on Rebecca's forced cheerfulness, on the cake Sarah brought with too many candles that took 3 tries to blow out. "Who keeps texting?" I finally asked, unable to hide my hurt that he couldn't put the phone down for one meal. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Just work, Mom. Why do you always need to know everything?" The words stung. I'd only asked one question. Rebecca touched his arm. "Honey, it's her birthday. Maybe silence it?" He pulled away from her touch. "Maybe everyone can stop monitoring me for 5 minutes." The table went silent. Emma started crying softly. Luke stared at his plate. I'd apologized. I'd apologized for asking about the texts, for ruining dinner, for being too intrusive. Sarah walked me to my car afterward, put her arm around my shoulders. "He's under a lot of pressure at the hospital. Don't take it personally." But his phone had buzzed 7 more times during dessert, and each time his expression softened in a way it never did when he looked at Rebecca or me or his children. Someone was making him happy. Someone he couldn't wait to hear from. I'd driven home alone that night and cried in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside to my empty house. 3 months ago, I dropped by Daniel and Rebecca's house unannounced with leftover soup. Rebecca had mentioned Luke had a cold, and I wanted to help. Sarah's car was in the driveway. Odd, since she lived 40 minutes away and hadn't mentioned visiting. Rebecca answered the door flushed, her hair disheveled, eyes wide. "Margaret, I wasn't expecting you." "I brought soup for Luke. Sarah's here?" She stopped by to borrow a book. Just leaving, actually. But Sarah appeared behind Rebecca, looking equally flustered, smoothing her shirt. Maggie, what a surprise. Something felt off. The air in the house was wrong. Tense. I'd handed over the soup and left quickly, feeling like I'd interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. I'd convinced myself I was imagining things, reading too much into innocent moments. Now I understood. They'd been meeting at Daniel's house, using Rebecca's home as their secret space, probably while Rebecca worked late, while the children were at school. My son and my best friend tangled together in the house I'd helped them buy, while I delivered soup and played the convenient, clueless grandmother. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages from Sarah, seeing them now through different eyes. What time does Daniel get off work tonight? Is he doing okay? He seemed stressed at dinner. I'm worried about him. Has he mentioned anything about his marriage? Maybe you should give them some space. Young couples need privacy to work through problems. You visit too often, Maggie. They need room to breathe. Every message pushing me away from Daniel while pulling herself closer. Every message gathering information she could use. Every message from someone I trusted completely, who was systematically destroying my family while pretending to protect it. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. Can we talk? Please don't tell anyone what you saw. There's so much you don't understand. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to demand answers. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to crawl into bed and never come out. Instead, I grabbed my car keys. If Sarah wanted to talk, we'd talk, but on my terms now. Not as the naive, grateful friend she'd been manipulating for years. As the woman who'd finally opened her eyes and seen the truth. I didn't respond to Sarah's text. Just drove straight to her house, the photographs still in the lunchbox on my passenger seat. My hands shook on the steering wheel. 20-minute drive through streets I'd traveled 1,000 times, visiting the friend I'd trusted with my life. The woman who'd slept with my son in my house, in my guest bedroom, under quilts I'd sewn with my own hands. Sarah's car sat in the driveway of her small ranch house, lights on inside. She was home, waiting for my response, probably rehearsing whatever explanation she'd concocted. I walked to the door, rang the bell. She opened it immediately, face pale, eyes red from crying. Before I could speak, she pulled me inside and whispered desperately, "Please, Maggie, let me explain before you hate me forever. Explain how you've been sleeping with my son." My voice came out cold and unfamiliar. Explain how my best friend of 40 years betrayed me in the worst possible way. Sarah started crying, but I noticed something strange. The tears didn't feel genuine. They felt rehearsed, practiced. She led me to the living room, tissues already arranged on the coffee table, like props in a play she'd staged. "It started innocently," she began, voice trembling. Daniel was lonely in his marriage. Rebecca had become cold, distant. He needed someone to talk to. "So you volunteered to sleep with him." "It wasn't like that." Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "We'd meet for coffee after his hospital shifts, just talking. He was struggling, Maggie. His marriage was falling apart. He felt trapped." I watched her face carefully, noticed how she emphasized his loneliness, his victimhood. "When did talking become more—" Sarah looked away. "About 2 years ago. One night after a particularly difficult shift, he broke down, started crying about how empty he felt. I comforted him, and it just happened. 2 years. They'd been doing this for 2 years. While I babysat his children every weekend, while I hosted Sunday dinners and pretended not to notice the growing distance, while I lay awake at night worrying about his happiness." "Where?" I asked quietly. "What?" "Where did you sleep with my son, Sarah?" Her face flushed. She didn't answer. "My house?" I pressed. "My guest bedroom?" Silence. "My kitchen?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "My backyard during family gatherings while I served you dinner and watched your children?" Sarah's tears came faster now. "I'm sorry. God, Maggie, I'm so sorry. But you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything. Daniel loves me." She said it desperately, like a lifeline. "I know it's wrong, but he loves me, and I love him. We couldn't stop." I stared at this woman I'd known for 35 years, searched her face for the friend who'd held me at Thomas's funeral, who'd celebrated with me when Daniel got into medical school, who'd been my sister in everything but blood. She was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed. "Rebecca knows," Sarah said suddenly. "She's known for months." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She figured it out, found texts on Daniel's phone. But instead of confronting us, she's been planning something." "Planning what?" Sarah leaned forward, gripping my hands. Her fingers were cold. "She's setting a trap, Maggie. For Daniel. For all of us. She's been documenting everything, building a case. She's not the victim here. She's been using the affair to destroy him. I pulled my hands away. You think that makes this better? That Rebecca knowing somehow justifies what you've done? I'm trying to warn you. Sarah's voice cracked. She's going after his money, his practice. She's going to take everything, and she'll use you to do it. Your house, your savings. She's already planning how to access it all during the divorce. Cold dread spread through my chest. How do you know this? Daniel told me. He's seen documents, heard phone calls. Rebecca's been meeting with lawyers for months. She's not heartbroken, Maggie. She's calculating. I stood up, suddenly needing distance from Sarah's desperation, her justifications, her attempts to paint herself as something other than a betrayer. So let me understand this. My voice came out flat. You've been sleeping with my son for 2 years, in my home, using our friendship as cover, and now you're warning me that his wife is planning to use the affair you created to take everything in a divorce, and I'm supposed to, what? Thank you? I'm asking you to protect him. Sarah stood too, reaching for me. Daniel needs you. He's your son. Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done, he's still your boy, and Rebecca is going to destroy him. I looked at her tear-stained face and felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness. He's not a boy. He's a 40-year-old man who made a choice. You both made choices, and now you want me to save you from the consequences. Maggie, please. Don't call me that anymore. I walked toward the door. You lost the right to call me anything when you decided my son was more important than our friendship. At least he wanted me. The words exploded out of Sarah, raw and vicious. At least someone chose me instead of just tolerating me out of obligation. I turned slowly, looked at the woman I thought I knew. Is that what this was about? Feeling wanted? Sarah's face crumpled. Do you know what it's like watching you play the martyr for 40 years? Poor widow Margaret, sacrificing everything, so noble. Everyone admired you. But I worked just as hard, suffered just as much. I deserve to feel special too. The truth, finally. Not love, not passion, just envy wearing betrayal's face. You're right, I said quietly. You did deserve to feel special, but not like this. Not by stealing from someone who loved you. I walked out, didn't look back when Sarah called my name, didn't stop when she started sobbing on her doorstep. I drove home in silence, past neighborhoods where normal families lived normal lives, where best friends stayed loyal and sons honored their mothers and betrayal didn't wear familiar faces. And for the first time since opening that lunchbox, I felt something besides shock and grief. I felt rage, cold, focused, absolute rage. They'd taken everything from me, my trust, my family, my sense of safety in the world. Now I was going to take something back. I sat in my living room that night, surrounded by 40 years of memories. Photographs of Daniel as a baby, gap-toothed and grinning. His medical school diploma, framed and hanging above the fireplace. Pictures of Rebecca and the grandchildren at Christmas, everyone smiling like we were the perfect family. All lies, or maybe not lies exactly, maybe just truths that had expiration dates I'd been too naive to notice. I looked around my house, the one I'd nearly lost after Thomas died, the one I'd fought to keep because I thought it would be Daniel's inheritance, his safety net, proof that his mother's sacrifices meant something. And I realized with stunning clarity that I'd been everyone's tool. Daniel used my money to build his career, then used my home to conduct his affair. Sarah used our friendship as cover to betray me. Rebecca was using my vulnerability to build her divorce case. Even my grandchildren had become weapons in someone else's war. I was the convenient resource everyone accessed when they needed something: money, childcare, a place to hide their secrets. But nobody actually saw me. The woman, Margaret Eleanor Thornton. Not just mom or grandma or that nice widow who worked at the hospital. They saw an ATM, a babysitter, an obstacle between them and what they really wanted. Something inside me shifted, cauterized, sealed off the soft parts that made me easy to manipulate. I opened my laptop, a device I rarely used except for email and recipes, and started researching. Divorce law, asset protection, grandparents' rights, elder financial abuse. I read about coercion, about manipulation, about how victims of financial exploitation are protected under law. I discovered that Rebecca's threats at lunch weren't as solid as they'd seemed. My accounts were in my name alone. Daniel never actually transferred marital assets to me. I learned about protective orders, about documentation requirements, about how to legally shield myself from people trying to access my resources. I read until 2 in the morning, taking notes in a spiral notebook, like I used to do in nursing school. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer. Not Daniel's lawyer, not a family friend, a complete stranger from a firm 3 towns over, someone with no connection to my son or daughter-in-law. A woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in elder law and family disputes. I made an appointment for 9 o'clock the next morning. Then I spent the rest of the night going through every document in my house. My will, property deeds, bank statements, Thomas's life insurance paperwork, certificates of deposit I'd forgotten about. I created copies of everything, photographed the lunchbox contents, and uploaded them to a private cloud account I created specifically for this purpose. I screenshot every text message from Sarah, every email from Rebecca asking about my estate planning, every strange conversation I could remember. I was building evidence, though I didn't know yet what I was building it for. I just knew I was done being everyone's victim. At 2 in the morning, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. My hair had gone completely gray years ago. I'd stopped coloring it when Thomas died, deciding it didn't matter if anyone found me attractive anymore. My face showed every year I'd lived. Lines around my eyes from squinting at patient charts, deeper creases around my mouth from smiling even when I wanted to cry. I looked like someone's grandmother, someone's aging mother, someone easy to dismiss and manipulate and push aside. But my eyes looked different now, harder, colder. The eyes of someone who'd finally stopped being grateful just to be included in her own family. They wanted to make me invisible, I whispered to my reflection. They wanted to erase me. But invisible women see everything, and erased women have nothing left to lose. I went to bed that night without crying, without calling anyone, without seeking comfort or reassurance. I slept better than I had in years. Patricia Chen's office was nothing like I expected. Small, cluttered with case files, coffee cups scattered across every surface. She was younger than me, maybe mid-50s, with sharp eyes behind frameless glasses. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Tell me everything. I started with the lunchbox, ended with Rebecca's threat at lunch 2 days ago. I expected judgment, or pity, or the careful condescending tone people use with elderly women who've been taken advantage of. Instead, Patricia leaned back in her chair and said, "Mrs. Thornton, you're not the victim here. You're the prize, and everyone in your family is fighting over who gets to control you and your assets." The words hit like cold water. "What?" Patricia spread my documents across her desk. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance paperwork. Your house is worth approximately $800,000 in the current market. Your savings, investments, and life insurance total another $400,000. You have a monthly income from your pension and Social Security of about $3,000. You're a wealthy woman by most standards, and you've been acting like you have nothing. I'd never thought of myself as wealthy. I'd spent so many years scraping by, counting pennies, sacrificing. "Let me show you the pattern," Patricia continued, pulling out a legal pad. "Your son borrowed money for his medical practice startup. Did he repay you?" "He said he would once the practice was established. That was 8 years ago. Has he repaid anything?" Silence. "Your daughter-in-law has been pressuring you to add her name to your house deed, for estate planning purposes," she said. I nodded. "And your best friend suggested you set up a trust fund for Daniel, with her help managing it. She said it would protect him during the divorce." Patricia's expression hardened. "Mrs. Thornton, they've all been positioning themselves to access your wealth. Your son through direct loans he never intends to repay. Your daughter-in-law through legal manipulation and co-ownership claims. Your friend through trust management and emotional manipulation." She pulled out Rebecca's divorce documents that I'd found on the family cloud account. "This is actually brilliant and ruthless. Rebecca is threatening to implicate you in asset hiding. She's trying to scare you into either staying neutral or actively supporting her case. If you support Daniel, she drags you into expensive litigation. If you support her, you testify against your own son. Either way, she wins leverage." My hands trembled. "So what do I do?" "That depends. Do you want to protect yourself, or do you want justice?" "What's the difference?" Patricia leaned forward. "Protection means securing your assets, removing yourself from their financial games, living quietly while they destroy each other. Justice means making them understand what they've done, making them face consequences. But justice costs more than money, Mrs. Thornton. It costs relationships. It costs your image as the devoted mother and grandmother. It costs the family you thought you had. I thought about Daniel pounding on my door last night while police lights illuminated my street. About Sarah's cold admission that she wanted to feel special, as if my pain was a reasonable price for her validation. About Rebecca's calculated threats disguised as concern. They already took my family, I said quietly. I'm just the last one who knew. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Then we're going to need a different strategy. And you'll need to be willing to do things that will make them hate you. They already made that choice for me. Patricia pulled out a legal pad and began sketching out a plan. As she talked, I realized I wasn't just protecting myself. I was going to war. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for someone else. I was fighting for me. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I'd never imagined. Methodical, secretive, strategic. Patricia's instructions were clear. Document everything. Trust no one. Play the role they expect while building your case. I installed a recording app on my phone that activated with a single button press. Every conversation with Daniel, Rebecca, or Sarah was now preserved digitally and backed up to the cloud account only Patricia and I could access. When Rebecca called asking about my decision, I played confused and elderly. My voice wavered just enough to sound uncertain. I've been feeling muddled lately, I told her. Everything is so complicated. I need to talk to my doctor before making big decisions. Rebecca's frustration bled through her sympathetic tone. Of course, Margaret. Take your time, but we really should finalize things soon. I let silence stretch, then said hesitantly, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me to do. Just sign the documents I showed you. The estate planning papers. They protect everyone. Maybe you should explain them again? I'm sorry, my memory isn't what it was. I could hear Rebecca's teeth grinding over the phone, but she couldn't push too hard without revealing her true intentions. I started showing up at family events with my phone recording in my pocket. At Emma's soccer game, I stood near Rebecca while she talked to another mother, my phone capturing every word. I'm finally getting free from Daniel and his controlling family, Rebecca said, voice low but venomous. He thinks he's going to keep the house and his practice. He has no idea what's coming. At Sunday dinner, which I insisted on hosting despite Rebecca's protests, I watched Daniel and Sarah carefully. Their feet touched under the table. Their eyes met across the food I'd spent hours preparing. Small moments of intimacy they thought I couldn't see. My phone recorded Rebecca's voice when she pulled me aside in the kitchen. Have you thought about signing those papers, Margaret? My lawyer really needs them this week. Which papers, dear? The estate documents. Remember, we discussed them at lunch. Did we? I'm sorry, I must have forgotten. Rebecca's smile went rigid. Let me go over them again. She explained, voice tight with barely controlled anger, how the documents would make her executor of my estate, how it would simplify everything when I got older, how it would protect me from confusion. Every word recorded, every manipulation preserved. I played this role at church, at the grocery store, at the grandchildren's school events. The slightly confused elderly woman, sweet but forgetful, needing guidance and protection. People who'd known me for decades bought it completely, because society expects older women to fade, to become less sharp, less capable, less aware. It made me the perfect spy in my own life. I recorded Daniel telling me I was getting too old to manage my own finances, his voice patient but condescending, like he was talking to a child. Mom, you forgot to pay your electric bill last month. What if something serious happens and you forget something important? I hadn't forgotten. The bill sat on my counter, paid online 2 weeks early like it had been for 10 years. But I nodded along, playing confused, letting him build his case that I needed help. His case that would justify taking control. I recorded Sarah suggesting I should move into a retirement community. You'd have friends there, Maggie, activities, you wouldn't be so lonely, and you could rent out this big house. I could manage the property for you, make sure everything's handled properly. Every suggestion designed to separate me from my assets while making it sound like care. I also reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years. Thomas's brother Carl, a retired accountant who lived 2 states away. My old nursing supervisor Linda, who'd become a patient advocate. a neighbor I barely knew who mentioned she worked as a paralegal. I built a quiet network of people who owed me nothing but offered help anyway, because they recognized what was happening. Linda connected me with an elder abuse support group. I attended one meeting and heard stories that mirrored mine so closely I felt like I was staring into mirrors. Children who borrowed money and never repaid it, families who pressured aging parents to sign over property, spouses who isolated their partners from friends and support systems, betrayals disguised as love and concern. I wasn't alone. My story wasn't unique. The system that made me vulnerable made thousands of people vulnerable. The most devastating discovery came when I visited my bank. I'd done business with First National for 37 years. The branch manager, Carol, had processed Thomas's life insurance check when he died. She'd helped me refinance the house. She'd watched Daniel grow up through photographs I'd share during deposits. I asked for copies of all transactions on my accounts for the past 3 years. Carol pulled me into her private office and closed the door. "Margaret, I need to tell you something I probably should have mentioned before." Her voice was quiet, troubled. "6 months ago, Daniel came in and tried to add himself as a joint account holder on your savings account. He said you'd given permission but forgotten to sign the paperwork." My blood went cold. "What?" "I refused without your signature and presence." He became angry, threatened to report me for not protecting an elderly customer, said you were showing signs of dementia and needed family oversight of your finances. I couldn't breathe. 6 months ago, while I was babysitting his children, while I was making Sunday dinners, while I was playing the devoted grandmother, he'd been trying to access my accounts without my knowledge. "Why didn't you tell me?" Carol looked miserable. "I should have, but he's your son. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. And honestly, Margaret, he's a doctor. He sounded so concerned about you, so convinced you needed help. I second-guessed myself. That was the power of it. Daniel's authority as a physician, his performance of concerned son, his ability to make everyone doubt reality except his version. If Carol had succeeded in adding his name, he could have drained my accounts, could have claimed I'd authorized it, could have left me with nothing, and I'd have had no recourse. I drove home shaking so badly I had to pull over twice. Sat in a grocery store parking lot, staring at the transaction records, seeing patterns of attempted manipulation going back years. Small tests, requests for account information, suggestions that he should be added just in case something happens, all building toward the moment when he'd have full access. I called Patricia from that parking lot. "I'm ready," I said. "Tell me exactly what we're going to do." Patricia's voice was steady, confident. "We're going to make sure they never forget what it costs to underestimate you." Patricia's plan was elegant and brutal. First, I'd sign new estate documents in her office, with witnesses and notarization, everything going to my grandchildren in an irrevocable trust that neither Daniel nor Rebecca could touch. I'd add a clause specifically stating I was of sound mind, free from coercion, and making these decisions with full understanding of their implications. Second, I'd host a dinner at my home with Daniel and Rebecca. I'd pretend to be ready to help with the divorce. Patricia would have a private investigator outside, documenting who arrived and left at what times. I'd wear a recording device. The goal, get them to reveal their intentions on tape. Third, I'd meet with Sarah the following day. Another recorded confrontation where I'd push her to either confess fully or threaten me. More evidence of the manipulation pattern. Finally, we'd file comprehensive legal documents, restraining order against Rebecca for elder financial exploitation, formal complaint against Daniel with the state medical board for misusing his authority to manipulate me, civil lawsuit against both for attempted fraud, with Sarah named as co-conspirator. Patricia warned me again. "This will destroy your family. Your son will hate you. Your grandchildren might not understand for years, if ever. You'll be alone." I thought about the woman I'd been 3 weeks ago. The one who'd opened a lunchbox and felt her world shatter. That woman would have begged for reconciliation, would have blamed herself, would have sacrificed even more to fix what was broken. But she was gone. "I've been alone for 2 years," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." The documents were signed on a Tuesday morning. Patricia's assistant and a notary public served as witnesses. I read every page carefully, understanding exactly what I was doing. Removing Daniel completely. Protecting my grandchildren from their parents' greed. ensuring that no matter what happened, my assets would serve the people I'd intended them for. The dinner happened on Friday night. I cooked pot roast with potatoes, the same meal I'd made every Sunday when Daniel was growing up, the one he'd request for every birthday, the one that used to make him hug me and say, "Nobody cooks like you, Mom." I set the table with Thomas's mother's china, lit candles, made everything perfect. Rebecca arrived first, bringing wine and that folder of documents she'd been trying to get me to sign for weeks. Daniel arrived 20 minutes late, distracted by his phone, barely kissing my cheek before sitting down. We ate. The conversation was strained, careful. I asked questions about the grandchildren, about Daniel's work, about Rebecca's job search. Then I said, voice hesitant and confused, "I've been thinking about what we discussed, Rebecca, about the house, and maybe moving somewhere smaller." Rebecca's eyes lit up. She leaned forward, setting down her fork. "I'm so glad, Margaret. I think it's the right decision for everyone. But I'm not sure I understand the financial parts. You said you'd buy it from me?" "Below market value, yes. To help you out. You wouldn't have to deal with realtors or showings. We'd handle everything quietly." I glanced at Daniel. "And you agree with this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes, just nodded. "You're getting older, Mom. This place is too much for you to maintain. Rebecca's offer makes sense. So I'd sell you my home, the one your father and I bought 40 years ago, the one I nearly lost after he died, the one I worked myself sick to keep for less than it's worth. Then move into a facility, and you'd live here with Rebecca and the children." Rebecca's smile was bright, predatory. "Exactly. The kids love this house. It would give them stability during the divorce. But wouldn't Daniel own half if you buy it while you're still married?" Rebecca's smile didn't falter. "That's why we need to move quickly, before the divorce is finalized, and price it low enough that it doesn't raise flags as an asset transfer. My lawyer has it all structured perfectly." I turned to Daniel. Let my voice tremble just slightly. "So you want me to sell you my home for less than its value so your wife can take it in the divorce and I should live off whatever's left?" Silence stretched across the table. The candles flickered. The pot roast, nobody had finished cooling on their plates. Rebecca set down her wine glass carefully. "That's not how I'd phrase it, but essentially, yes, it's the practical solution for everyone, Margaret." The recording device in my pocket captured every word, every cold calculation, every casual dismissal of my sacrifice. I stood up slowly. "I need to think about it. Give me until Monday." They left shortly after, Rebecca taking her folder of unsigned documents, Daniel barely saying goodbye. I sat in my kitchen after they were gone, listening to the recording playback. Hearing my son agree to steal my home, hearing my daughter-in-law outline fraud with casual confidence, hearing them talk about me like I was already dead, already gone, already irrelevant, except as an obstacle to overcome. I allowed myself one moment of grief, one moment where I mourned the family I'd thought I had. Then the cold determination returned. Monday morning, Patricia would file everything, and they'd learn what it meant to underestimate me. Saturday morning, I texted Sarah, "Come to the house, we need to talk." She arrived within an hour, carrying coffee and pastries like this was a normal visit between old friends. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I placed the photographs from the lunchbox on the kitchen table between us. "Tell me the truth, all of it, starting from the beginning." Sarah's face crumpled instantly, tears springing to her eyes, but I'd seen her cry 1,000 times over 35 years. I knew the difference between genuine emotion and performance. This was performance. "Maggie, I'm so sorry." "That's not the beginning," I interrupted. "Tell me the truth, Sarah. When did you start wanting my life?" The question hung between us like smoke. Sarah's tears stopped. Her expression shifted, the mask slipping away to reveal something underneath I'd never seen before. Pure, corrosive envy. "Do you know what it's like?" Sarah's voice came out different, harder. "Watching you play the martyr for 40 years. Poor widow Margaret, raising her son alone, sacrificing everything. So noble, so selfless, everyone loved you for it. Everyone felt sorry for you." I stared at this woman. I thought I knew. "But you got everything," Sarah continued, anger rising in her voice. "Thomas's life insurance, the house paid off, a son who became a doctor. What did I get? A husband who drank himself to death and left me with nothing but debt. A son who works at a car dealership and can barely make rent. So you decided to take my son? Sarah laughed, bitter and ugly. I decided to take something that made me feel valuable again. Daniel wanted me. He chose me. Not Rebecca with her cold ambition. Me. For the first time in decades, someone wanted me. My chest ached, but my voice stayed steady. How long have you been planning to take everything from me? I'm not taking anything. Sarah's voice rose. Rebecca is taking everything. I'm just a complication in her plan. But Daniel promised that after the divorce, after everything settles, we'll be together. Move somewhere warm. Start fresh. The final truth crystallized. He's lying to you, Sarah. He's using you to hurt Rebecca. Rebecca's using the affair to destroy him financially, and both of them have been using me as their personal bank account. You're not going to get Daniel. You're going to get nothing, just like me. Sarah stood abruptly, knocking her coffee cup over. Brown liquid spread across my table, soaking into the wood Thomas refinished 20 years ago. At least I felt alive for 2 years, she shouted. At least someone wanted me. What do you have, Margaret? An empty house and children who can't wait for you to die so they can fight over what's left. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. I called after her, voice quiet but clear. I have something you'll never understand. I have the truth now, and I know exactly what to do with it. The door slammed. Sarah's car pulled out of my driveway with squealing tires. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee soaking into the wood, and whispered to the empty house. That's everyone. I've heard from everyone who betrayed me. Now they get to hear from me. I called Patricia. It's done. We have everything. Are you sure about this, Margaret? Once we file, there's no going back. I looked around my kitchen, at the pot still soaking in the sink from last night's dinner, at the photographs still scattered across the counter, at 40 years of memories stained with betrayal. I've never been more sure of anything. Then let's make sure they never forget what it cost to underestimate you. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. If you're still with me, thank you. I know this is painful to hear, but I need you to understand why what happens next was necessary. Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been made to feel invisible in their own life, and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt this kind of betrayal, because knowing I'm not alone is what gave me the strength to finish this. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Patricia filed everything simultaneously at 9 o'clock. Restraining order against Rebecca for elder financial exploitation and coercion. Supporting documents included the recorded dinner conversation, her drafted divorce papers showing plans to seize my assets, testimony from my banker about Daniel's attempted account access, formal complaint with the state medical board against Daniel, misusing his position as a physician to manipulate my medical and financial decisions, using his authority to convince others I was incompetent when I refused to comply with his demands, civil lawsuit against both Daniel and Rebecca for attempted fraud. Sarah named as co-conspirator, transcripts of every recorded conversation attached, evidence of a 2-year affair conducted in my home, documentation of systematic attempts to access my finances. Patricia also filed my new will and estate documents with the probate court, making them public record. Impossible to contest, based on claims of diminished capacity. By noon, Daniel received a call from the medical board requesting his immediate response to allegations. By 1 o'clock, Rebecca's attorney received the restraining order. Her paralegal called Patricia's office 3 times, increasingly frantic. By 2 o'clock, Sarah was served with legal papers at her home by a process server who found her still in her bathrobe, crying. I spent that day at Patricia's office, waiting. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt hollow. But I also felt something else, a fierce, cold satisfaction that I was no longer anyone's victim. My phone exploded with messages. Daniel called 17 times. I didn't answer. Rebecca sent texts ranging from apologetic to threatening. Margaret, this is a misunderstanding. Please call me. You're making a terrible mistake. My lawyer says you're going to regret this. I was only trying to help you. I didn't respond. Sarah left a voicemail that was mostly incoherent, sobbing. Maggie, please, you're destroying my life. I'm so sorry. Please make this stop. Please. I deleted it. Patricia advised me not to respond to anyone, and for once I followed advice that served my own interests instead of everyone else's. The first crack in their united front came that evening. Rebecca called Patricia's office, voice shaking, asking to negotiate. She claimed she'd been misunderstood, that the recordings were taken out of context, that she'd only been trying to help me plan for the future. Patricia's response was professional and devastating. Mrs. Thornton is no longer interested in your help. Any further contact with her will be considered harassment and added to our legal filing. Have your attorney contact me if you wish to discuss settlement terms. Daniel tried a different approach. He showed up at my house that night, pounded on the door, shouted that I was destroying the family, that I was being manipulated by lawyers who just wanted my money. I stood inside, listening to my son rage on my doorstep, and I didn't open the door. A neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived 3 houses down for 20 years, called the police. When officers arrived, they found Daniel still shouting, fists hammering against wood. I opened the door, showed them the restraining order, explained calmly that my son was violating a court order. They escorted him away. One officer stayed behind to make sure I was okay, his expression sympathetic but professional. "You did the right thing, ma'am," he said quietly. "I see this more often than you'd think. Family members taking advantage of elderly relatives." I wasn't sure if he meant it as comfort or just fact. Either way, it didn't make me feel better. I watched through my window as police lights faded down the street, and I realized that the family I'd sacrificed everything for had been dead for years. I was just the last one to know. The medical board investigation became public within days. Hospital administrators where Daniel worked received official notice. Colleagues started asking questions. Patients requested transfers to other doctors, not wanting to be associated with someone under ethics investigation. The focus was narrow but devastating. Did Dr. Daniel Thornton use his medical authority to manipulate his elderly mother? Did he leverage his position as a physician to convince others she was incompetent when she refused to comply with his financial demands? Even if she wasn't technically his patient, the ethics violation was clear. The hospital placed him on administrative leave pending the investigation's outcome. Paid leave, but still a public mark against his reputation. I heard through Patricia that Daniel's partners at his practice were furious. They'd built a reputation for integrity. Now patients were canceling appointments, questioning whether they could trust any of the doctors. Rebecca's divorce case imploded spectacularly. Her attorney tried to proceed with the original filing, but Patricia submitted all my recordings and documents to the family court judge. The judge reviewed evidence showing Rebecca's plan to fraudulently acquire my home, her threats to implicate me in asset hiding, her manipulation of an elderly woman to support false claims against Daniel. While the divorce still proceeded, a marriage that broke and couldn't be saved, Rebecca's credibility evaporated. Her claims of financial abuse were dismissed as fabrication. Her request for full custody was denied. The judge ordered 50-50 custody and warned both parents that using the children as weapons would result in sanctions. The settlement she'd been counting on, the one she'd spent months planning, the one that would have left her comfortable and Daniel destroyed, vanished. She'd get standard division of actual marital assets, which, it turned out, weren't nearly as substantial as anyone thought. Daniel had been living beyond their means for years, borrowing against his future income, maintaining appearances he couldn't afford. They were both going to struggle financially, both going to have to rebuild. Neither was going to get my money to cushion the fall. Sarah faced the worst consequences. My lawsuit included claims that she'd used our friendship to gain access to my home and private information, that she'd shared details about my finances with Daniel, that she'd conspired to manipulate me. Civil case, not criminal, but the social destruction was complete. Our church community learned about the affair. Women who'd been in Bible study with us for years stopped speaking to Sarah. She resigned from every committee rather than face the whispers. Her employer, a small insurance company where she'd worked for 15 years, asked for her resignation. The publicity damaged their reputation. They couldn't afford to keep someone associated with elder exploitation, even peripherally. Her son Marcus called me, voice thick with tears. "Mrs. Thornton, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what my mom was doing. I'm so ashamed." I told him gently that he wasn't responsible for his mother's choices, that I held no anger toward him. But I could hear in his voice that Sarah had lost more than her job and reputation. She'd lost her son's respect. I watched it all unfold from a careful distance. Patricia's updates, occasional news articles in the local paper, whispers from neighbors who still spoke to me. I didn't feel joy, but I felt that grim satisfaction that the truth was visible now, that I wasn't the only one who knew what they'd done. Then the letter arrived. Hand-addressed envelope, Emma's careful cursive on the front. My oldest grandchild, 11 years old. I opened it with shaking hands. "Grandma, why are you being mean to Mommy and Daddy? Don't you love us anymore? Mom says you're trying to take all Daddy's money and make us poor. She says you're sick and mean now. I don't understand. Please stop being mad. Love, Emma." The letter broke something in me that all the betrayal couldn't touch. They were poisoning my grandchildren against me, using them as weapons, feeding them lies to justify their own behavior. Emma and Luke, who'd spent every weekend at my house, who I'd rocked to sleep and fed and played with, who called me Gigi because Grandma felt too formal. They thought I was the villain now. I called Patricia, voice shaking. "I need to see my grandchildren. I need them to understand." Patricia's response was gentle but firm. "Not yet, Margaret. Right now, their parents are poisoning them against you. If you try to contact them, Rebecca will claim harassment. Use it to strengthen her custody case. We need to wait until the legal proceedings are complete. Then we'll petition for grandparent visitation rights." "How long?" "Months. Maybe longer. They'll forget me. Maybe. Or maybe when they're older, they'll ask questions, and you'll have answers. But right now, you have to let them go." I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, holding Emma's letter, understanding the true cost of my revenge. I got justice. I got protection. I got my assets secured. But I lost the only innocent relationships in my life. 6 months passed. The divorce between Daniel and Rebecca finalized in March. They split custody 50-50, alternating weeks. Neither got what they wanted. Daniel's medical license was suspended for 6 months, required to complete ethics training. His practice survived, but damaged. Some patients returned eventually, but the reputation he'd built over 15 years had permanent cracks. Rebecca kept the marital home, but had to work full-time to afford it. Her dreams of a massive settlement and comfortable single life had evaporated. She worked at a dental office now, managing patient records. Not the executive position she'd planned on after finishing her MBA. Sarah moved to Arizona to live near her sister. She sent me a letter before she left, not apologizing exactly, but explaining, trying to make me understand the loneliness that drove her choices. I burned the letter without finishing it. Some explanations don't deserve to be heard. The civil lawsuit settled out of court. Daniel and Rebecca agreed to pay my legal fees, substantial but worth every penny. They signed documents acknowledging their attempted exploitation. They agreed to stop contesting my new will. They promised never to attempt accessing my finances again. In return, I dropped the fraud charges. Not forgiveness. Pragmatism. My house felt different now. Emptier, but also lighter somehow. I wasn't waiting for Sunday dinners that would never happen. Wasn't hoping for phone calls that would only bring manipulation. Wasn't performing the role of devoted mother and grandmother for people who saw me as a resource to exploit. I joined a support group for elder financial abuse survivors, met other women who'd experienced similar betrayals, children who stole, spouses who manipulated, families who saw aging parents as obstacles to inheritance. My story wasn't unique. The system that made me vulnerable made thousands vulnerable. I started volunteering with Patricia's law firm, helping other elderly clients recognize warning signs of exploitation, using my nursing background to spot manipulation tactics in medical settings, turning my pain into purpose. The grandchildren remained out of reach. Rebecca maintained her narrative that I was unstable and vindictive. Daniel told them I'd chosen money over family. But I planted seeds for the future. I wrote letters to Emma and Luke, not to send now, but to give them when they were older, when they could ask questions without their parents' bitterness filtering the answers. I documented everything. Not the legal battles, the love. Photographs of their childhood, stories about their father as a boy, memories of their grandfather, recipes they'd loved, drawings they'd made that still covered my refrigerator. Creating a record of who I really was, so that someday when they were old enough to wonder about the grandmother who disappeared from their lives, they'd have truth instead of lies. One afternoon in April, I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. He looked older, tired, gray showing at his temples that hadn't been there before. We stared at each other across the produce section. Shoppers flowed around us like water around stones. Then Daniel said quietly, "I'm sorry, Mom. for all of it. I wanted to feel something: anger, vindication, grief. Instead, I felt nothing. "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't give me back the years I spent believing you loved me." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I did love you. I do love you. I got lost." I nodded slowly. We all got lost. The difference is, I found my way out. I walked away. Didn't look back when he called my name. Drove home and unpacked my groceries in my quiet kitchen. No one pounding on the door demanding things from me. No one manipulating me into sacrificing myself again. No one treating me like an obstacle to overcome. Just me, alone, free. Sunday evening, the time my family used to gather. I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, cup of tea cooling beside me, book open on my lap, something I'd wanted to read for years but never had time for. My phone sat silent on the table. No demands, no manipulation, no one needing me to be smaller so they could feel bigger. I thought about the woman I was when I opened that lunchbox 6 months ago. That woman would have begged for reconciliation, would have blamed herself, would have sacrificed even more to fix what was broken. She'd have signed Rebecca's papers, given Daniel access to her accounts, believed Sarah's explanations about loneliness and love. She'd have made herself smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely. But that woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, lonelier, but free. I looked at my house, my garden, my life, and realized something profound. For 72 years, I'd defined myself by how much I could give other people, how much I could sacrifice, how invisible I could make my own needs. I'd been proud of it, called it love, called it devotion, called it being a good mother, good wife, good friend. But it was just fear wearing virtue's mask. Fear of being alone, fear of being unneeded, fear that if I stopped sacrificing, I'd have nothing left to offer. Fear that I didn't matter unless I was useful. The people who loved me really loved me. Not the transactional kind that depended on what I could provide. They'd never asked me to disappear. Thomas never asked me to work myself sick. He'd have been horrified to know I'd spent 15 years martyring myself for a son who saw me as an ATM. The real friends I'd made in my nursing years, the ones I'd lost touch with while pouring everything into family, they'd valued me for who I was, not what I could give. Even my grandchildren, before their parents poisoned them, they'd loved my presence, not my presence, my attention, not my money. I'd confused sacrifice with love, and the people who didn't love me had been happy to exploit that confusion. The sun dipped below the horizon. My tea had gone cold. Tomorrow I'd wake up and volunteer at Patricia's office. Help another woman recognize the warning signs I'd missed. Maybe save someone from learning these lessons the hard way. Tomorrow I'd have lunch with Linda, my old nursing supervisor, who'd been calling regularly since this began, building new friendships based on mutual respect instead of need. Tomorrow I'd live my life for myself, make decisions that served me, stop apologizing for taking up space in my own story. But tonight, I sat on my porch in the gathering darkness and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Grief for the family I'd never really had, anger at the people who'd betrayed me, sadness for my grandchildren, caught in the middle of adults' failures. And something else, something that felt like peace. I chose myself. Maybe that made me selfish, maybe that made me cruel. But for the first time in 72 years, I chose myself. And I was still here, still standing, still free. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you for witnessing my story, for letting me be heard. I know some of you think I should have forgiven them, that family is everything. But family isn't blood. Family is respect, love, trust. And when those things are gone, all you have left is biology and obligation. I chose myself. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe that makes me cruel. But for the first time in 72 years, I chose myself, and I'm still here. Still standing. Still free. If my story helped you in any way, if it gave you permission to protect yourself, to value yourself, to stop being invisible, then share it. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you can hear more stories like mine, and please tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done. because I need to know I'm not alone in this, that somewhere out there, someone understands why I had to walk away. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are never too old to choose yourself.